Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 93.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Adam Almaraz. He is the Director of Admissions for the law school at ASU, and he has a lot of great information today about what it takes to get into law school, kind of the path that students need to take starting in high school as far as getting all the way to law school if that's their goal. And aside from this actual interview, I just also wanted to bring up, for parents out there, if your student is considering law or some form of law degree, you may want to Google law schools cutting back or law schools reducing class sizes and just see what's going on out there. Because although law is a great profession, at this point there's a little bit of controversy going on where many law students and law graduates are not finding the work that they intended to find when they decided to pursue law school. So right now there seems to be an overabundance of lawyers, and because of that, there's less applications to law school. So law schools are having a tough time filling their classes and finding qualified students. So there's a little bit of controversy going on. I just want people to be aware of that because I think most people that aren't directly in law and law education don't really know much about that. So, and again, this is a situation that will probably pass over the years as lawyers retire and demand rises again. But at this point, there is quite a bit going on. So if your student is considering a law degree, I guess I would think twice or at least really understand what you're getting into because there's a lot of press out there right now about students graduating with large debts because of their law degree and then not being able to find work that can support them and pay back their loans. All right, if you are not dissuaded by what I just said and you want to learn more about law school, I think there's a great opportunity. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the interview with Adam Almaraz. As always, show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/93 for the 93rd episode here. So all this stuff that we talk about will be available on our website. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the interview with Adam. All right, today I'm sitting down with Adam Almaraz. He is an admissions expert in law school. He actually works at Arizona State in their law department. So welcome, Adam.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and how you came to do it.
Sure. So I'm the director of JD admissions at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University, which means I oversee, in many ways, the really all aspects of the admissions process for our Juris Doctor program here. So that's the degree program for folks who actually want to be licensed attorneys, because there's a few other ways folks can get degrees in the legal field, but maybe not necessarily want to practice. And I really kind of, through my own law school experience and college experience, discovered that working with students is something that I really had a passion for. So I am a graduate of ASU Law myself. I graduated back in 2012 and was a student ambassador. Ultimately decided that I didn't want to practice law in a traditional sense, and with various opportunities that had arose here at the law school, was able to continue working with the admissions office after I had graduated. And so now I kind of get to help students and applicants who are have dreams of being lawyers, help them navigate that process and be successful in the application process in many ways, hopefully for my program, but also as sort of just general counseling for folks interested in law school in general.
Okay. So does that mean you're part of the committee or maybe the guy that reads the applications and makes decisions?
Yeah, so I do participate in the decision-making process when rendering decisions for our applicants, myself and a few other individuals here in the law school. So I do make quite a few of those decisions about who shows up in the fall.
Okay. Can you give us a feel then for like how many applicants do you get and how many spots do you typically award and how competitive is it?
Yeah, so our program is pretty competitive. We are among the top law schools in the country. We draw right now about 1,500 to 2,000 applications each year. We, like many schools in the country, after the recession, have seen a little bit of a downturn in applicant numbers. And we will admit about 500 to 600 applicants to ultimately get our incoming class of somewhere in the neighborhood of about, our goals are usually about 220 to 240 students with each incoming class now. So it's a competitive program to get admission into, but certainly not out of reach because we do a holistic file review. So we're looking for the right folks as much as we're looking for sort of the highest scores and highest GPA type of applicants.
Okay. Oh, great. I guess a question kind of flashed through my brain as you say you admit 240. Do those 240 do pretty much the same thing as they go through law school? I mean, if you look at like a med school or nursing programs and some of those things, they have what's called a cohort, and they have 50 or 100 students that all take the same classes, sometime at the same time. But I mean, certainly they pretty much take exactly the same schedule in the same order for the 4 years. And then every year they add a cohort that starts at the beginning again. Is that the way law school works, or is there different paths and different emphasis and that kind of stuff?
So it's a little similar in the first year. So, and this is true of law schools across the country, that in your first year of law school, which we call the 1L year, students are given their course schedule. So students in their first year of law school don't really get to pick their classes. We assign a standardized curriculum. So, pretty much every law student in the country, when they start, for example, is going to take contract law, tort law, civil procedure, property. Many will take constitutional law, criminal law, and some legal writing and research coursework. So that's pretty standard as far as the curriculum goes in the first year. How and when schools teach it and what semesters in that first year might vary a little bit. But then once a student gets past that first year of law school, by and large, the world is their oyster as far as how they pick their classes and focus in on particular areas of concentration or focus programs and things of that nature. So some students might sort of stay generalists and, and take a whole broad variety of courses throughout their time with us. And then some folks, for example, if there's that student who knows they really want to be, a prosecutor or a public defender, for example, after that first year is going to probably focus a lot of their coursework in trial advocacy, related opportunities, criminal law courses, and things that are going to really help them navigate towards that ultimate career goal. So after the first year, it's largely self-driven by the student and what it is that they want to accomplish during their time with us.
Okay. Well, great. So then it sounds like there may be, 5 or 6 different emphasis that you might consider, or is it more than that, or is that?
So, there's really so many different paths that students can carve out for themselves. And sometimes I would say carve out kind of paths and concentrations that maybe we haven't necessarily even thought of. A great example I actually have of that is I have, a student who just graduated this last year, but he had a huge interest in space law, which to most folks, isn't something that they really thought of as being an actual area of practice or sort of a real existent thing. But, as our technology continues to advance, there's actually lots of questions about how we regulate a whole variety of issues as it relates to exploring what is beyond our planet. So there are actually companies now investing in projects to be able to do extraterrestrial mining and mining on asteroids and things like that. And, figuring out those questions of, okay, well, how do countries have rights to minerals on asteroids or other planets? And is that international law? Is that domestic law? And figuring out how do we regulate industries like that when they start to go elsewhere are sort of real questions now. So he actually he started building his curriculum and his interests with us in a way that was going to help him be involved in policy questions. He created a space law student group with us. So sometimes there are things, really outside of what we would, see that are typical. So I can't really say there's an exact number of emphases because students are really able to put together a selection of courses that are going to fit their career goals. But there are easy ones to think about, like criminal law is pretty standard. Folks who maybe want to do business law, or you can think of things like environmental law, patent law and intellectual property work, international law, family law. There's always those sort of standard practice areas that usually come to mind when people think about what it is that attorneys do.
Okay, so obviously, as you mentioned earlier, you're reading applications and that kind of stuff, and it can be relatively competitive. So how do students compete, and what is it that you're looking for typically, either your school specifically or maybe just law schools in general? How do students kind of, quote unquote, get the leg up or do the right things to bolster their odds?
One of the things that is very important when we are reviewing an applicant's file is their LSAT score, which is the standardized test that anyone who wants to attend a JD program has to take, and then their undergraduate GPA. Those two things together are very strong indicators for us here at ASU Law, as well as for other law programs, about the likelihood of success, in particular in the first year academically in a law program. So those two things tend to carry really a lot of the weight when we're looking at candidates. How good their LSAT score is, and then how well they did in their undergrad academics. But really, there is a lot of other information we're getting in the application. So applicants will submit to us letters of recommendation, a resume, and a personal statement. And those other pieces are going to be really what we use to subjectively measure and get to know the applicant. And it's a full file review. So, just because an applicant maybe has, for example, a low GPA or a high GPA does not necessarily mean that that applicant is presumptively going to be admitted or denied, because we're going to see full transcripts. We're going to be looking at academic trends, how challenging the coursework is that the student took in their undergraduate major, the institution that they went to, and the nature of its sort of reputation and rigor. But also, the personal statement and the resume are where we really get to know the applicant. That's where we get a sense of hopefully who they are really as a person, their interests, their character, and figuring out if in many ways just on a personal level, if that applicant is a fit for our program and if they're going to be bringing experiences and qualities and things to the law school that we think will be beneficial in an incoming class. So it's always really, important, applicants need to perform really well on the LSAT, prepare for that, very rigorously and do well in their academics. But really also pay attention to those things like the personal statement, the resume, and the letters of recommendation. Because there are applicants, for example, who it comes down to those other subjective pieces. If committee members or file readers feel like the person belongs in our program, or sort of needs to be in our program, And that's where we get that kind of information. So there's really so many things that end up going into that process. But I think what really helps an applicant is however they approach it and the information that they're using in their application, that they do it from a very genuine place and motivation. One thing that we certainly are able to pick up as file reviewers is the difference between oftentimes that candidate who seems to, for example, be padding their resume or be trying to write on a subject or say things in a way that they think is going to look impressive to us versus the applicant who is writing a personal statement or has a resume that seems to really reflect their genuine interests and really who they are. And I think applicants who really approach the application process from sort of a genuine place and just knowing themselves and having a lot of introspection and awareness about who they are end up faring much better than the applicant, for example, who's trying to do things just because they think it might give them a little bit more leverage in the application process. Because law schools, we're very much interested in having the right kinds of people in our programs and building our classes in a way that continues to kind of progress sort of the ideals and identities that any given law school has. And the best way for us to be able to find those people is when we know that they're coming from a very genuine place in their application materials.
Right. I guess in some other grad programs and other tracks, so to speak, there's a bit of a trend for some students to kind of take the easy way out. Instead of taking the chemistry or biology degree as an undergrad, as you move into med school, you take something that, you take the psychology or something that's quote unquote easier, so that you can have the strong GPA, so that you can potentially have a stronger application. Do you see that? Do you guys see through that kind of stuff? How does that work?
Yeah, so we definitely see that come through in the application process. There are certainly folks who, at first glance, when maybe we see a GPA or something, and it's like, wow, this person got a 3.9 undergraduate GPA. Okay, like, wow, this is very impressive. And then as we start to look at the transcript in detail, I'll see that maybe a candidate never really took anything higher than 300 level courses at their undergraduate institution. And, maybe the coursework that they took doesn't appear to have been anything that really would have helped to develop their writing skills or their critical thinking skills. There's sort of lots of what look like really just kind of those fun, more easy courses as opposed to something that was actually academically challenging. And then the next applicant, could easily be someone who maybe even has below a 3.0 GPA, which, for us, for example, might not at first glance seem very competitive. And then we find out, okay, this person was a chemical engineer as an undergrad. And in general, those hard science degrees, it is much harder to perform, and at a level that you're going to have really high GPAs. And we see that this person has, for their major and their coursework, really challenged themselves and has done really well. And that person might, be looked at more favorably than the person who has the 4.0, because that person, even though they have a 4.0, hasn't really demonstrated to us that they actually will be able to handle the rigor of a law school program. And I think really that's true of sort of any graduate type program. It's important for applicants to recognize that graduate level coursework is oftentimes very intensive. It takes a lot of dedication and a lot of work, and it's hard to expect great success as a graduate student if you're not already, challenging yourself at the undergraduate level. And those are things that we can see in the application, and we take stock of when we're making our decisions.
Right, absolutely. So then tell us a little about the timeline then. If I'm interested in going to law school, obviously that's a decision you usually make. I mean, the final decision is made sometime when you're an undergrad, although I think a lot of students are thinking law school even in high school. So when do you start applying or visiting, or what's the process to take that next step into law school?
Sure. So I think as a general rule, it's never necessarily too early to start collecting information if a student is interested in going to law school later on. So I will have, for example, parents or high school students contact me sometimes because they're interested, or their child is interested in possibly pursuing law as a career. And certainly as a high school student, there's not really much to be doing in the application process as far as getting materials ready, because there's so much that will develop and change from that point to when the applicant graduates from their undergraduate institution and then isn't eligible at that point to apply for law school. But so for the very, kind of go-getters in a sense who are thinking about these things as a high school student, I think one of the best things that they can try and do is doing things like shadowing local attorneys, speaking with people in the legal profession just to start getting a sense of what the profession is like, visiting law schools. There are many law schools who welcome and are happy to give tours even to high school students and their parents, and sometimes they even have pipeline programs and things, educational opportunities designed specifically for high school aged individuals to start getting them interested in the law and thinking about that as a potential career path. But once the applicant is an undergraduate, if the student really wants to pursue law school immediately after they graduate, junior year is really, by spring junior year is, I think, when that student needs to begin thinking in a very serious way about the application process. So the applicant will apply about a full year in advance of when they want to start. So for example, my students who will be starting this fall 2016, the applications that they began to fill out had opened up in the fall of 2015. And the application for most schools is available from the early part of the fall, usually until about mid-spring, sometime in March. There's a lot of work that goes into that process. So as a junior, students need to start thinking about, okay, when am I going to take the LSAT? It's a test that's only administered 4 times a year. So you have to plan well in advance of when you'll have time to study for it. Folks study anywhere from about 8 weeks to sometimes 6 months in advance of the exam. So if you know that you're going to take a long time to get prepared and ready, you have to plan potentially 6 months in advance of when you want to take the LSAT, so that you're prepared. And then taking the time and knowing how long it's going to take to solicit letters of recommendation from professors or employers, the time it will take to write that personal statement and get the resume together. So my general suggestion is that usually by the summer in between the junior and the senior year as an undergrad, that during that summertime, hopefully the applicants have sort of their plan of attack. They've kind of outlined and figured out, okay, this is my sort of personal deadline when I want to apply for these law schools. These are the law schools I want to apply for. This is when I need to have my personal statement ready. This is when I plan to have my resume ready. This is my planned test date for the LSAT, so that they don't put themselves in a position potentially where they're feeling rushed and pressured to make the hard application deadlines that schools set in the spring. So for that person who wants to go straight through from undergrad, junior year is really the best time to start thinking about that. Now, there are a lot of people who go to law school and have had gap years in between their undergraduate course of study and then attending law school. So for us, for example, the average age of the incoming class many years is somewhere between about 24 to 26. So most of our students have had some time off and away from school. And that timeline then can shift a lot and when the person needs to start getting busy with the application process, because obviously if you have a job and you're sort of in a career, it can be a little bit more challenging and sometimes a little bit more difficult to have the time to be able to go through a very intensive application process than when the student is finishing up their undergrad. And I think it's in some ways a little bit easier to manage that application schedule as a student. And so I think a good way to start for someone who's never really put much thought into the process quite yet is when they're a junior, start visiting law schools if there's any nearby that they have easy access to, coming into admissions offices and speaking with people like myself, contacting pre-law advisors. Many undergraduate institutions have a pre-law advisor on staff. Sometimes all they do is pre-law or pre-professional advising, or sometimes it might be someone who's in the career services office who does that. And those individuals are the ones who can really help kind of get the fine details of an application strategy together and help that applicant figure out, okay, this is when I need to get these particular pieces of the application completed, and these are the kinds of schools that I should be looking at and applying for. But yeah, junior year I think is the best time to really get the ball rolling.
All right. So then, I guess, is there such thing as a pre-law undergrad? And then if there is, what are your thoughts on it?
So I do see there are some undergrad institutions that have a pre-law major, or maybe they have a pre-law focus within a particular major. It's usually going to be related to some type of political science degree or some type of more of like a social science type degree. I don't think doing a pre-law major, if a school offers one, is necessarily the best option for every applicant. Certainly for some individuals in their undergraduate course of study, I think it provides them a lot of insight and also great knowledge that they will be able to transfer into their law studies. But one of the great things about law school is that there's no required major to apply. So I'll see applicants, who are political science majors, and then folks who have studied film as an undergraduate student. And kind of one of the things that I think is smart when, at least as an undergraduate, trying to pick a major or course of study, is I do encourage applicants to really choose a course of study that they have a lot of interest in and hopefully some passion for, because in my opinion, I think students perform much better academically when they are studying something that they really enjoy. If you are, for example, you don't enjoy studying political science, but you think that's the best way to be a strong applicant for law school, chances are you may not do as well in your courses if you actually don't enjoy the material. And if you, are more excited and passionate about English literature, then I would encourage an applicant like that, to really think about studying English literature as an undergraduate student, because they'll just do that much better in their coursework. And because grades are such a big component to the admissions process, that in the end will end up serving them better. And really, I think in all varieties of majors, there are ways that students can challenge themselves through coursework, and then I think it's also smart to explore outside of your chosen major and take some courses that are going to help improve critical thinking skills, analytical skills, writing and research skills are always going to be very important for a law program. So those kinds of specific pre-law things I think can be great, but they're not necessarily the right choice for every applicant who thinks they want to go to law school. I think kind of following your heart in some ways and your passion is going to be what ends up making an applicant hopefully a stronger and more prepared applicant once they actually do decide that they want to pursue law school as an option.
Great. So Now, do typical law school applicants, do they apply to multiple law schools?
Yeah, so the average applicant nationally is applying, usually somewhere, I would say, from about 6 to 10 schools. It might shift from year to year. So we do see applicants who oftentimes are applying to a variety of places.
Okay, so then if you're applying to multiple places, there's a chance you're accepted to multiple places. Can you enlighten us a little bit on that process? How do you choose for one school to the next, and what would an applicant look for in a law school that might help them decide which one's right for them?
Yeah, so that's a big decision, and it's a really hard one to make oftentimes, because schools can be really different. I think sort of an overarching way that students should think about it is the school that fits them best. Now, fit for one student can be, aligned with finances and, the most inexpensive option. But for another student, it could be about program opportunities and maybe the ability to put a concentration in a particular area of study. I think it's always wise for students to apply to multiple schools so that hopefully they do have some options available to them to be able to find a school that fits them best. Because the information that applicants will get as they are applying, and then the information that they have access to and will get about a program once they are admitted, sometimes can be quite different. In that you'll get a lot more detail in things once you are an admitted student and have the ability maybe to interact with faculty or current students and things like that in a way that is harder to do when you are just an applicant. So it's great to have dream schools, for example, someplace that maybe a student has their heart set on, but I think having some awareness that they could very well discover that even if they're admitted to that school, they might find that, it doesn't fit them very well. One thing I did when I was applying to schools, and people organize information in different ways, but I found very useful, was I actually had a spreadsheet. I had an Excel spreadsheet of all the schools I was applying to. I used it in the application process to help me keep track of things like application deadlines and nuances maybe between application requirements, but then also to fill in, kind of basic information like incoming class size, geographic location, job placement statistics, different programs and concentration areas offered, so that at least at a quick glance, I was able to visually, kind of look at the differences between programs. But I think at the end of the day, one of the best ways that a person can help themselves, decide what program might be the best fit is to visit the schools. So when I had my short list of schools that I had been admitted to that I still had strong interest in, I went and I visited those programs. And a lot of law schools for their admitted students will have some type of admitted student day or welcome program in the spring usually, whereas an admitted student, you can go and spend a day or a couple days there and you'll meet potentially, your future classmates, but oftentimes you'll meet lots of faculty, current students, be able to interact with other people in that law school community to just, see if maybe there's, just a fit on a personal level and kind of the character and personality of the program there. But oftentimes, we certainly love having students even do individual visits, and many other law schools do the same thing. Where I really encourage my admitted students to come down and visit our school and see really what we're all about and get a feel for what it's like to be a student here. Because I think, there's no good replacement, even for all the information that students and folks can get, online and things of that nature about a program. There's no good replacement for going and seeing the school and interacting with the people at that school in person, to really get an idea of, okay, is this someplace I want to spend 3 years? And also likely, make a significant financial investment in, because as we all know, law school is not an inexpensive endeavor. But any way folks can get access to information about a program, I think is great. Whether that's speaking with their alumni or their faculty, current students. But current students tend to be, I think, one of the best resources to speak with because they're in the trenches doing it, so to speak, and they'll usually be very candid with admitted students. What their experience is like, things they like or maybe don't like about the law school, and they're a great resource.
Okay, well, great. That was a lot of great information. If people want to learn more, is there a way that they can contact you or get involved with your law school, or give us whatever contact information people can use?
Folks can certainly feel free to get in touch with me directly or any of my other staff here. We're always all very happy to speak with folks interested in going to law school. And the best way for them to do that is to usually call us at our main admissions line. And that phone number is 480-965-1474. Also, if folks go on the website and go to the admissions page, there's also some information on there on how to be able to schedule a visit or come sit in on an information session and things of that nature if they're in the neighborhood and want to take a look at the law school or just come in and sit down with someone in a face-to-face way and talk about law school and the admissions process. The other resource that I think is really a great place to start is with the Law School Admissions Council. And the LSAC is the organization that is sort of an overseer in some ways nationally of the application process. So law schools across the country, we host our applications electronically through the LSAC. And the LSAC is also the organization that administers the LSAT exam. So students end up having to become familiar with them at some point anyway. But they have a wealth of resources on their website about the application process, strategies and ways for applicants to start finding information about various programs. And their website's pretty easy to remember. It's just lsac.org. And from that webpage, it's pretty user-friendly and a great way to navigate and find resources.
Right. So I will put all this stuff into the show notes so people can find it at our website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com as well. But I really appreciate all the great information. And any final thoughts for any future lawyers out there?
Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to be able to, help provide a little bit of information about the process because sometimes there's just so much misinformation out there. And I think, just kind of a final thought. I always really encourage folks who are interested in going to law school or applicants to always reach out to law schools. I think one of the things sometimes that is most frustrating for me and my colleagues across the country in law school admissions are when we hear stories or applicants come up to us and say, well, my friend told me I should do this, or this person, told me I needed to do this in the application process. And sometimes it's very incorrect or bad information. And what we want to do as admissions officers is really help our applicants be the best applicants they can be. So I think folks should never hesitate to pick up that phone or send that email to the law schools they're interested in. And if they have questions about the application process, they should always come directly to us. We're the ones who ultimately oftentimes are making the decisions about the application. And so we're a great resource for information through that process. We want our applicants to be as well informed as they possibly can. We're not trying to hide the ball or do anything like that. So I would encourage, folks interested in going to law school to never be shy about reaching out to us. We want to help get as much information into their hands about our programs and about the process as best we can.
All right. Well, great. Well, I really appreciate it. I think we've learned a ton today. And people that want more, obviously, they can contact you. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Brad.
All right. That was a great interview with Adam. Hopefully you learned a ton about law school. And if you've got an undergrad or a high school student that's considering going on to law school, you learned enough to understand what you're getting into and start learning more and get jumping into the process. As always, we have show notes available, as I mentioned at the top of the show, at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/93. And also in our notes, we also have a link to what I call the scholarship guide for busy parents. There's a lot of families out there that are working on scholarships that are trying to figure out, should I apply to 1 scholarship, 10 scholarships, 50 scholarships? And we've all heard those fantastic stories of somebody that worked really hard and won thousands and thousands of dollars in scholarships. As a matter of fact, every year or two, that type of person writes a book on how to win scholarships. The challenge that a lot of families face, however, is they don't have that go-getter kid. They don't have the kid that's going to go out there and do 50 scholarship applications. Maybe their student was only willing to work on 5 or 10. This scholarship guide is there for all families to really understand how and what you should be doing when we talk about scholarships. Some families maybe will ultimately ignore scholarships and they'll move on and do other things. Some families will apply to a lot of scholarships. And many families, the right answer is somewhere between. You're going to apply to 3 or 4 or 5 scholarships. The key scholarships for your particular situation. The scholarships at the college you're attending, the scholarships at the high school you attend, the scholarships where mom and dad work and play, the scholarships where the student is unique. If you have students that are twins or triplets, that makes them unique. If you have a student that's a black belt in karate, that makes them unique. If you have a student that wins a lot of spelling bees, that makes them unique. So there may be scholarships available for your particular student based on how they're unique, or family heritage, or religion, or there's all kinds of reasons that there may be scholarships out there. But you really need to understand how to figure that out and go get them. So that's what the scholarship guide is all about. It's free, and it's available if you just go sign up at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/scholarships, where you put in your email address and we will email you 4 videos. Each video is only about 12 minutes long, so it's not a complete overwhelm. It's just some quick information where you can watch some quick videos, learn what you need to learn, and then make some decisions on what your scholarship strategy is going to be. Again, that's available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/scholarships. All right, that's all we have for today. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.